Andrews Air Force Base, Maryland. It's about 10 miles or so from Washington, D.C. In hindsight, I loved it. In hindsight, when I was there, it was turbulent. It was turbulent. No one really complains about a flight except for the little bit of turbulence you tend to deal with, because there's uncertainty surrounding turbulence. It's the same position I'm in now, where there's just uncertainty surrounding turbulence. You don't have all the answers. You want all the answers. You have questions. You have more questions, and all you have is turbulence. So one of the first big obstacles I dealt with at my first base, working in finance, was doing briefings, in processing briefings. You got a room full of about 20 people, and everybody sitting around table. And at Andrews, DC in general, it's a high concentration of officers. That's a high concentration, mainly due to the Pentagon, the headquarters of the Department of Defense is in your city. And at the time, before the 11th at Bowling stood up, Andrews was handling all finance issues. Even though Bowling was still there, a lot of people were just skipping Bowling Air Force Base, which is in the heart of DC. A lot of people don't know about Bowling Air Force Base. There's no flight line. It's just a small little headquarters area. The Navy's there. I believe it's a joint base, but it's right smack dab in the middle of DC. But then you have Andrews, where the planes are parked, and you have the guard there as far as F-16s to intercept and whatnot. You have a lot in the DMV area. So my in-processing briefings, either Mondays or Wednesdays, I'm sitting there dealing with captains and up, and I walk in the room with my little A1C stripes. I'm in there trying to flex, and they don't know what they're doing. It's finance. A lot of them probably have previous experience as far as filing a voucher, but they don't know the answers. That's why they're there. Otherwise, they just fill it out and send it in. They're trying to get paid for their travel. Cool. It's my job to walk them through their documents, and that was obviously way before COVID. So you had 20 people in a room, and I'm sitting there, and I'm supposed to be the subject matter expert. And I'm sitting there clueless, because tech school, it taught you what you're supposed to know, but you didn't leave there knowing what you're supposed to know. It's a major difference between tech school, where they teach you theory, and they teach you like the general subjects, and then your first base, where you're actually doing it. And you need answers on the spot. You need experience. You need to account for certain variables in an operational setting versus the educational setting. So I'm sitting there trying to figure things out. And it took me literally, I typed out every word. I didn't type it out. I wrote out every single word I was going to say during that briefing. Every single word. Every single word I was going to say during that processing briefing, I wrote it down, because I hated being unprepared. So before we got to the questions, and of course I had side people with me, I wasn't by myself. But in the beginning, I'm sitting there worried about, how do I brief them on this stuff and not forgetting what I'm going to say. And no, I came in there with sheets of paper saying, all right, turn to your 594. This is your BH document. And I'm reading word for word. Now, obviously it's normal now. But of course, before you get to this point where you just 594 BH document, you don't think about it in the moment, where this is not always going to be here. This struggle is not always going to be the same. Of course, in the moment, you don't have that same confidence that I do now with in processing and travel, all those different variables I've experienced now, and so I approach it differently. So that was the first hurdle I had to deal with, as far as, I mean, if you include living in the dorms. I think back then I was sleeping on a full-size bed, so it wasn't as bad as I'm sleeping on now. It's twin size. That's a whole nother thing. But yeah, just being at my first base, obviously I had a car, but being new to a major city, living in a major city that close to DC, but I mean, you're technically still in a major city. Like, that was a whole thing. Going off base every day to explore DC and racking up parking and fees, and like just blowing money, like not realizing I can't afford to just go downtown and just park wherever I feel like it. $20 every time I park. No. So just a lot of learning from living in a small, military town, to living in a major city where it just happens to be a lot of military bases in the major city. A lot of experience is built there. But that was my first base.